Today we hear of a couple different people who are afraid. Afraid not of God, but afraid of if God really knew who they were, he wouldn't be asking them to follow him. To either be a prophet or to follow him and be an apostle. Of course, in our first reading today we have Isaiah, one of the greatest prophets of all time. But what are some of the words we hear from him right away? He says, "Woe is me, I am doomed, for I am a man of unclean lips, living among a people of unclean lips. Yet my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." We have Peter today, who after seeing the boats being filled up with fish, looks at Jesus and states, "Depart from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man." Depart from me. Both Isaiah and Peter saying, essentially, I'm not worthy to be a follower of you. If you only knew who I am, if you could truly see who I am, you know that I am not good enough. Of course, we know this is a silly statement because God does know who they are. God created them. Yes, in his image and likeness, but of course they sinned. And this is what Peter says, I am a sinful man. And Jesus knew this. When he picked out the apostles, he didn't go and pick out the Pharisees or the scribes or the most righteous people in Israel. He picked out these 12 men, one who was going to betray him, one who was going to deny him 3 times. Why? Because he wanted to show them that he wants to bring salvation and love to everyone, even those who are sinful. We too have this feeling sometimes, don't we? God, if you only knew who I was, you wouldn't love me. Well, we know that statement's not true. We know that's not from God, that's from the evil one. God does love you, even in your sinfulness. Now, yes, he wants you to work on this. Yes, he wants to free you from this sin, but he loves you. He wants you to have a relationship with him. He wants you to go into the deep with him and to come to know him and experience the only type of love that he can give, this agape type of love. But sometimes we're afraid. What does it mean to go to the deep with God? What does it mean to leave my own comfort zone? Well, we have some practical examples of this. I, of course, could go into fishing examples, but that would probably bore you a little more than it would bore me. So instead, I want to use a more practical example, but still talking about water. Remember as a kid, when you started learning how to swim, what did your parents tell you? Stay in the shallow end, right? Why? So you can still touch the ground, so they can keep their eyes on you, so you don't drown. That's why they told you to stay in the shallow end, right? Now, eventually, hopefully you learned how to swim. And maybe you went to the deep end, and you're standing over the side of the pool. Maybe you have a lot of courage, and you're standing on the diving board. And you're standing there, and you go, do I jump or don't I? What was inside of you? Fear. Fear. What's going to happen? I've never been in the deep end before. Will I sink to the bottom? Will anyone save me if I do? Can I really swim in the deep end of the pool? And then hopefully you jumped in. As long as you know how to swim, you can jump in the deep end, right? Hopefully you jumped in. And all of a sudden what happened is you were able to experience the fullness of the pool. Not just the shallow end, but the whole pool. You can start doing laps. You can start jumping off the diving board. You can even do a flip turn if you're really good at it without sneezing. I haven't accomplished that one yet. But you get the point, right? The whole pool is open to you because you finally got over your fear. Well, the same is true with our relationship with God. We have to jump right in. Once we learn how to float a little bit and swim in our faith life, it's time to go deep. It's time to go deeper. I know a couple years ago I was talking to my spiritual director. I don't know if I was a priest at the time or a seminarian, but I was one of the two. And he says, "Alex, how are you doing?" I said, "I'm good." He goes, "Really? You're good. You always say you're good. How are you doing?" I looked at him and I said, I'm afraid. I'm afraid of going deeper in my faith life. And the reason why is I don't know what God's going to tell me to do. I don't know what he expects of me. Is he going to make me change things in my life I don't want to change? So I told him, I'm afraid. And once I said that and admitted it to him, it opened up. I said, why would I be afraid of God? He wants nothing but the best for me. He wants the absolute best for me because he is God and he loves me. And so what my spiritual director told me to do is say, jump in, go deep. Don't be afraid, because then you can experience the fullness of God. You see, in our faith life so often, and in other things as well, we get comfortable with where we're at. And we stop asking the question of God, what do you want me to do? How do you want me to grow? We could use another practical example, maybe in your marriage. When you were married, you were probably pretty happy and comfortable and having fun. Now, hopefully you're still comfortable and loving each other and having some fun in your marriage. But hopefully it's deeper than the day you got married. Hopefully your love has grown. Imagine if in your marriage you still were loving each other the same way. Yes, perfect at that time, hopefully, but even greater now. Why? Because you two have grown closer together. It's the same thing in a friendship as well. Friendships grow deeper. Why? Because you have to continue to develop this relationship. The same is true with God. He wants us to go deep. He wants us to know him and love him. And yes, take a leap of faith and go deep. Well, praise God that the church in her infinite wisdom has set up certain seasons during the year to help us to go deep with God. This Wednesday we start Ash Wednesday, this season of Lent, which is set up almost like a spiritual diet for us. Not just a physical diet by giving up chocolate. It's more than that. This spiritual diet so we can grow closer to God. And in some senses, get back to being spiritual fit. And then going to God and asking this all-important question. God, what do you will of me? You see, so often in Lent, this is what we say. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. But we forgot to ask the main question. God, what do you will of me? The most important question. What is your will? And then we listen to him. And he will reveal his will to you. And then we have to ask for courage. And saying, God, help me. You know who I am. You know that I am sinful. We could say the same thing that St. Paul said. But by the grace of God, I am what I am. And his grace to me has not been unaffected. He will give us the grace we need to succeed. Not only this, but he gives of himself to us in the same way that he gave the prophet Isaiah, the angel who appeared and put this ember on his mouth. And Isaiah said, when this happened, see now that this has touched your lips, your wickedness is removed, your sin is purged. The same thing for us. Our wickedness will be removed, our sin will be purged in the sacraments. When we come and receive the Eucharist on our lips, God, who becomes part of us. When we go to confession, our sin being purged. All this in order so we may truly follow God's will and be who he wants us to be. His sons, his daughters, growing in a relationship with him. We can't say in our faith life, I'm good. That's not the proper answer. As I mentioned before, we can't retire in our faith life. We're never going to reach that pinnacle of saying, I don't have to go any farther. No, God every single day is calling us to go deeper. And why? Because in going deeper, what we are doing is we are falling more in love with him. We are following his will. We are being his children. Yes, sinners that we are. But then we can be like Peter and the apostles and leave everything behind and follow God. And we can be like the prophet Isaiah and say to God, here I am, Lord. I come to do your will.